So, Konami has been running a terrible show. They've been releasing terrible products that actively scam the consumer. Not only that, their unequal treatment of the global market is extremely infuriating and borderline racist. So, how do we actually get Konami to change? Well, to answer that, I've created a grid. Here we have a list of actions spread across the grid of how much an action hurts Konami compared to how much an action hurts local game stores. Ideally, we'd want actions that hurt Konami enough to influence change, while still keeping local game stores alive. Some actions hurt Konami less, but every action here does at some level hurt Konami's bottom line. For the love of God, buy singles. This is by far the lightest action on the grid. It stops excessive buying of boxes and limits it to just resellers and local game stores. So let's say you still want to play modern Yu-Gi-Oh! In tournaments. Well then, it does become almost impossible to not support Konami in some way. But if you have to, just buy singles. At its most basic level, this is because there's no guarantee you'll get the cards you need or even make your money back. I've said before that you need to buy a $600 case to just get the playsets you need, and that holds true today. For example, in the 2022 Mega Tins, there are 35 prismatic secret rares, but from a tin, you only get 3. Even if you buy multiple tins, that's an astronomically low chance for you to get the cards you want, especially if you want multiples. Now let's say you're buying boxes for an investment. On a small scale, this is impossible to do successfully due to the natural variations in card prices. A single box could net you a chase card, or it could net chaff and cause you to lose almost all value. Vendors only get around this by buying very large quantities of boxes to make the variations statistically unimportant. Not only that, the natural reprint cycle of Yu-Gi-Oh! Combined with how absurdly quickly the metagame changes, means that cards are a ticking time bomb of lost value. I'm not saying invest in buying 3 of whatever new chase card is in a set, but you shouldn't buy a case to get 3 copies of Triple Tactics Thrust. You should buy single cards you think you need now, or cards you might need later that are cheap now. Don't take the brunt of Konami's bad policies. Let big vendors take the risk instead. And check your local game store for their single collections. Konami gets off to people buying boxes for that addiction pool. I'm not the biggest fan of going to vendors alone, but if we go through vendors alone, less boxes will be sold overall, as cards can more efficiently get to the people who want them. Your local LGS is also a great place to look for singles. For those of you who don't know, there are a wide variety of third-party online Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulators. The most popular one, Dueling Book, runs in browser from a simple web search and lets players manually build and play decks from any format ever made. You can find Dueling Book with a simple Google search, and it's the most common Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulator used by Yu-Gi tubers such as Farfa, Simo, and MBT. And unlike Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, it's completely free. EDO Pro and Dueling Nexus are automatic sims, similar to Master Duel. These automate the effects of cards and are updated as cards are announced in the OCG. If you want to play Master Duel without having to deal with URs, this is my recommended place for dueling. These can also be found with a quick Google search, although you will have to do some downloads on your end. And lastly, if you have to, you can play Master Duel. It's relatively easy to succeed at the game as a free-to-play player, although this one does support Konami's bad practices. As we can see with no new secret packs for archetypes like Sword Soul, and new support for decks being locked into high rarities to get more gems from the player base. These are common free-to-play tactics and part of why I recommend trying other Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulators online. Plus, these older simulators support older formats, have complete card pools, and most importantly, don't charge money to acquire cards after a certain point. A more subtle way to screw over Konami is to play older and alternative formats. Goat, Edison, and Hat format are all amazing formats that Konami is almost completely unable to monetize. Konami's profit model is largely based around selling new cards for new meta decks, with reprint side sets every once in a while to capitalize off of how bad their first printing was. Old formats scare Konami because Konami can't sell you cards from these formats, especially not more than once. These formats are technically static, meaning one deck is enough to last you forever if you don't want to experiment. This is most likely why Konami has been so slow to support these alternative formats. There's zero value in them for Konami because cards from older formats are almost always cheap at lower rarities. Although, they usually have some great high-end versions for collectors. Old formats strike a middle ground that not a lot of options on this list can. It's also the best solution for Yu-Gi-Oh! Boomers, and just tired players in general who want the classic back-and-forth Yu-Gi-Oh! Gameplay. Playing older formats shows that players want a change in gameplay, as well as hurting Konami's bottom line. In this video's description are links to every major alternative format Discord servers. Here you can play in tournaments, get great advice, and find a community. As usual, I recommend Hat format, since it strikes a great balance between modern archetypal Yu-Gi-Oh! and slower trap-based gameplay. Of course, other communities are great too. Edison Format is the most popular for a good reason. Perhaps the most revolutionary action you can take against Konami is to proxy cards. By using a third-party site to print reproduction or alternative art cards, we can just ignore Konami's monopoly entirely. Of course, your standard at-home printer works just as well too. I would love to give you the exact print specifications and printers used for modern Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but that information would be illegal to give out. But I will say it's much, much lower quality than you think, and you certainly wouldn't want that quality as a consumer. For games like Magic the Gathering's Commander format, proxying has become extremely popular and the norm, especially with Wizards of the Coast themselves promoting it. This gives all players the ability to play $1,000 Commander decks and stick to the heart of the format, just having fun and building great and interesting decks. It's the only reason formats like Vintage can stick around at all. There's no reason we can't push more for accepting proxies in Yu-Gi-Oh! With Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks regularly costing around $500+, we should normalize proxying, at least on a local or casual level. If you care about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community growing, better deck experimentation, and Konami actually getting their shit together, then proxying cards and supporting those who do is the best decision you can make. Although, beware, this can hurt local game stores that aren't okay with proxies. But any game store worth their salt will openly sell you proxies. Well, the most simple way to stop Konami's bad Yu-Gi-Oh! Policies is just to not buy cards or play Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a bit obvious, but a boycott would work if enough people got involved. However, the thing is, Konami is vulnerable in so many other forms, this isn't the only solution. But if you do want to try out some alternative games, I would recommend the Bandai suite of games. Digimon TCG, One Piece TCG, and Battle Spirit Saga are all great options. You can also look into Pokemon. You can get the 5 best decks in that game for under $350. Legends of Runeterra is a great online simulator. Back when I played regularly, I was able to consistently own every card in the game as a free-to-play player. These games I recommended all have one thing in common that Yu-Gi-Oh! Lacks. At some level, they still care about the consumer. The last important thing we can do is to make sure Konami knows how we feel, and make sure everyone else knows about how anti-consumer their actions have been. Bad word of mouth is the most dangerous thing to a lot of companies. If you tell your friends about what's going on, they will be able to make better decisions accordingly. If people see proxies being used extensively at a local game store, they will also feel encouraged to do the same. Now, don't harass anyone, but make sure the official Konami accounts are aware of how the players feel, and how their bad and anti-consumer products negatively affect the player base. If there are official surveys or community questions, let Konami know how you feel. Just be honest, and give them the interaction they desire. If you want to get people on your side, all you have to do is tell them the same common truth for a lot of players. I love Yu-Gi-Oh!, but I can't play the game because the game has outpriced me. I know for a fact that a majority of Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans and players in the South American region have been absolutely devastated by the prices in this game, and it's killing the game's communities. It's bad even in America, where the prices are skyrocketing and this economy is not getting better. It's Konami's responsibility as a company to make sure they can maintain their customer base. All we need to do is remind them of that. That's all for today. I'm sorry for interrupting Deck Profile Week, but Konami's recent actions with the new deck build packs has angered me to a new point. They've made the entirety of the Vanquisher Soul archetype ultra rares, firmly putting the deck out of reach of most players. I've had this video in the works for a while now, and I guess today was the time to release it. Look forward to a big compilation of my previous videos on this topic, with updated and new segments. I'm trying to make a perfect distillation of Konami's anti-consumer policies that can be shared to every player and potential player of the game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.